Hello everybody, welcome back to another video by DissociaDID. This is a channel that is dedicated to erasing the stigma that surrounds dissociative identity disorder and educating about the psychology and biology that's involved with it. My name is Chloe, I'm the host of the system, which means I'm the alter who's out the most often. This video is going to be part 2 about communicating with your system. This video will be specifically looking at communication internally. So, there are a few ways that you can communicate with your system. A system is the collective name for all the alters that reside within one body. Now, if you've watched the first video about external communication, that is the best place for you to start, especially if your communication within your system is not very good at first. This is going to be slightly more involved because it involves internal communication, looking inwards, listening to and reacting to voices if you hear them. I think that the most effective way to communicate with the system, if you can hear the voices of your alters speaking to you, but you aren't very good at reaching back to them, is to use the buddy system method. This is very helpful for systems where only a few alters can communicate with each other and no alter can communicate with everybody in the system. The buddy system method is a way to sort of Chinese whisper your way around communicating with your system. It involves every person in the system having an associated buddy, which means that using my system, for example, let's say I needed to get a message to Ruby. My communication with Ruby is atrocious. I'm not good at reaching her. I can't hear her very well. Generally, when I'm communicating with Ruby, all I can really get is very intense feelings and emotions. I can't hear her voice very well. I struggle to find her, reach her. It's difficult to explain, but one of our system members, Jade, was essentially raised by Ruby. If you'd like to know more about this, you can watch our Meet the Alters series, which goes into more detail about the system members that you'll see on this channel. And there you can meet both Jade and Ruby, who I'm talking about. But Jade and Ruby have good communication. So let's say those two are buddies. Jade's buddy is Ruby. So if I need to get a message to Ruby, I know that the best person to communicate with her is Jade. I have decent communication with Jade, so I can speak to Jade and say, I need you to get this message to Ruby. That way, by using the buddy system method, Jade can then tell Ruby what it is I need to tell her because I can't reach her directly. So it's like using a third party to get your message across. This obviously isn't ideal because it means that there's less privacy, but when you live in a system, there's not much privacy to begin with. I have overheard things I have not wanted to overhear and other people have not wanted me to know. Sometimes things leak and, memories can be shared accidentally, opinions, secrets can be shared accidentally. You have to just kind of get used to it and roll with it. Now, if, for example, Ruby's buddy was Jade, but I didn't have good communication with Jade, we'd then go to another buddy. Who's Jade's buddy? So let's say Kyle. Kyle is Jade's buddy. I then have to go, Kyle, I need this message to get to Ruby. I have no communication with Jade. So Kyle would then be like, okay, well, I know that Ruby's buddy is Jade. So in order to get this message from Chloe to Ruby, I need to get to Jade or go straight to Ruby because Kyle is our primary protector and he can talk to pretty much anybody. But it works like that. For alters who don't have good communication with most of the system, the best way to do it is to talk to an alter who you can talk to, who can then give it to an alter who has a connection to the alter that needs to receive the message. It's like using Chinese whispers, but it's called the buddy system method. So everybody gets a designated buddy so that if you need a message to be received or passed on, then that's the person that you need to go to. This can also help make things move a lot faster. It can help alters not feel like they're not being heard or that they're being left out, not being communicated with, and can eventually increase the levels of communication within your system, which makes it easier to then communicate on all alters' behalfs. Using this system, you can get any information to the desired alter even if you have zero communication with them, so it's very useful. Another thing that I mentioned while talking about the buddy method is using Kyle. Kyle in our system is our primary protector. If you have protectors in your system and caretakers, they often have much better communication within the system than most of the other alters and the host will. The host is just the alter who fronts the most often. I'm the host, and that generally means that I have the most amnesia when other people are switching out, because my designated role as DID works is for me to not know that I have DID, at the beginning at least. Now, obviously, things have changed and I've been diagnosed and I'm coming to terms with working with the way my brain works in order to live a healthier life. But that also means that I do have a lot of inherent ability to dissociate, and amnesia hits me very, very hard. So it's difficult to keep track of what's going on, because every time somebody switches out, I generally don't have any memory of what they were doing unless they were co-con with me or very close to the front. But primary protectors generally have good communication within the system and lesser amnesia, at least to a certain extent. This is just in general. This does not apply to every system. Every system is different. Everybody's DID is different because it's based around your specific childhood and your specific brain. It will develop differently for everybody in order to best suit your needs. DID is created to help children who are experiencing extreme and repeated trauma to survive. It will be specific to whatever trauma you were experiencing, that child's experiences, and the way your brain works. There is no right way to have DID, and there's no right way to learn to communicate with your system. It can take a lot of time, but it is a good idea to try and get on good terms with your primary protector if you can. And generally, primary protectors and caretakers are good messenger boys, and they will be able to pass on messages to most people, and they're very, very useful to have on your side. Another way to communicate is what I call looking inwards. I'm not really sure how to describe this. I can kind of like look backwards into my own head, into the inner world, while I'm fronting, but I can only get snippets of what's going on. Like I'm doing it right now. I can see like a bird's eye perspective of the mansion that's in our inner world, kind of like with the roof taken off, like I was building it in Sims. I can kind of see where some alters are, whether they're close to the front, and get like vague feelings and emotions. So looking inwards can be helpful to see, is anybody nearby? Can anybody step in for me if I need somebody to front? If somebody is close to the front, can I get their attention? You can do this by saying their name out loud sometimes, or using positive triggers. We do have a video on positive triggers. If you don't know what they are, please be very careful when you're using them. But that is also a good way to encourage communication within your system, and also to learn how your system works, where alters are most often, who communicates with who the most often. I know that for some systems, meditating can help you get a clearer picture of your inner world. I started off without an inner world. I've explained this in videos before, especially videos about inner worlds. I've gone into detail about how our inner world came about and what it was like before I knew I had the ID. Whoa, okay, no, I'm dissociating. If you want to know about that, please do have a look at those videos, but looking inwards can be helpful too. I've already mentioned positive triggers. That can be very helpful if you are in an emergency situation where you need an adult to front, for example, or you need a primary protector to be there because something important or serious is going on and you don't have the right information. This does not always work and is not always appropriate. So definitely have a look at our video on that if you'd like to know more about positive triggers, because it is very in-depth and does cover a lot of the issues that surround using this as a mechanism to help you communicate and navigate daily life with the ID. But if you get it right, it can be very, very helpful. Listening for voices, if you hear them, you might be able to hear somebody trying to communicate with you or telling you what they want for dinner. They might be saying like, you're using too much salt, or I want this in the sandwich, add this to the sandwich, or something like that. Generally with me, it's the most intense when we're shopping for things, because all of a sudden everybody wants something, or certain triggers that can bring alters closer to the front, even if they don't make an alter completely step forward and front entirely. Hearing voices is something that I didn't realize was unusual, which sounds ridiculous, but I always thought that the voices I heard were what people call your inner monologue, or like your internal thoughts. What I was actually hearing was the voices of my alters speaking to me and to each other. It was just kind of background noise. I didn't take it seriously because I didn't think that it was anything unusual until I explained it to a nurse at the crisis team, and she was like, no, that's not what everybody else hears, and you need to talk to a doctor, which was the beginning of our journey to being diagnosed with DID. Again, we've covered this in other videos. If you can hear voices, sometimes you can sort of talk back, like think back. I guess it would be like if you have a single personality, if you don't have DID or OSDD, thinking to yourself, what your actual inner monologue would be when you can sort of communicate with yourself. I'm assuming that you can do that. The weird thing is, when it comes to inner thoughts and voices and stuff like that, there's no specific examples where someone can show me a clip of their thoughts and say that, well, this is normal and this is DID. So I just kind of have to judge based off what I've learned about DID and what the studies say about DID, what is average and what is not neurotypical. So if you can hear these voices, you can think back or sort of talk back. How good or bad your communication with that specific alter is will affect whether they can hear you and how clearly they're receiving your messages. So that takes a lot of work as well. We've also found that since living alone, speaking out loud, which feels really stupid and silly at first, is so helpful and much easier and clearer for both parties than thinking inwards. So speaking out loud to your alters, even if they're not there, can be very helpful. That's a good way to communicate as well. If you do have an inner world that you're able to explore, trying to map out the inner world and find out where people's rooms are, if you have specific rooms or places that people tend to hang out in the inner world so that other people can visit them there, or if you are able to go into your inner world, you can go and find somebody. If you needed to speak to somebody specific, you may be able to go and knock on their door in their room if your inner world is the kind of place that has rooms and doors and things like that. There's also something I was recommended by our partner system, which means we are in a relationship with somebody else with DID and we have multiple relationships between us and our alters. Their primary protector gave us some advice on how he reduces amnesia by using a whiteboard in the inner world. I've explained using whiteboards and sticky notes and things like that in the first video we did about communication, but that's strictly for external use. This is talking about in the inner world. What my partner's primary protector does, he leaves these messages on the whiteboard, which is kind of nearby where they would go when they're going to front. Fronting means stepping into the body, essentially, becoming the person who is controlling the body. So they have a whiteboard there, and on it is written, this is what I did while I was out, for example. So if you are looking back inwards, if you're able to do that while you're fronting, you may be able to see the whiteboard and see what the person before you was doing when they fronted. If when they left the front, they then immediately wrote down what they did while they were in the body on this whiteboard. Personally, we haven't been able to do that, but perhaps for some of you it will help. It does sound like a very good idea. Maybe that will be useful for some of you. I hope that some of these tips and tricks will be useful and that it may help reduce amnesia between your alters and your switches, which can take a lot of weight off. So hopefully at least some of these will be applicable to you and your system, and maybe if you aren't so comfortable exploring your inner world yet or aren't really sure how to do any of these things, that over time and with practice things become clearer. I promise everything does get easier once you learn what's going on and how your brain specifically was built to deal with your DID or OSDD, because it is different for everybody. If you have questions, please do leave them in the comment section below or reach out to a support group. There are lots on Facebook. We are in many of them. Ask questions and don't be afraid to ask for help. If you'd like to learn more about the psychology and biology specifically to do with DID, then you can watch our Debunking DID series, which is very, very scientifically heavy. It has all of the medical journals, studies, books, and resources that we use to make those videos in the description boxes, and they include a lot of things like brain scans and hard evidence, as much as you can get hard evidence when it comes to science. So if you are interested in learning about the psychology and biology, that would be the playlist for you. If you want more advice videos, we have an advice playlist, and we also have a Meet the Alters playlist if you'd like to know more about the people who are bringing you these videos. Thank you for watching, thank you for visiting the channel, and I hope that you stay safe and have a lovely day. Lots of love, everybody. Bye.